Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. You're very giddy today.
Yeah. Doing something well.
We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media, and professional services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. You ready for today's episode?
I think so. Are you ready for today's episode?
Sure. I'm really excited to bring a friend to both of us, Bill Tolson. Bill is the VP of Compliance and eDiscovery at Archive 360. Bill brings more than 25 plus years in archiving, information governance, compliance, and eDiscovery. Bill has worked in a range of high-tech organizations, from consulting firms and startups to multinationals. Bill has authored 4 ebooks, 60 plus articles, and hundreds of blogs. And now you're joining our fun podcast. You're going to have like podcast at the end of that intro going forward. Welcome, Bill, to the show.
Well, thank you. And thanks for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So, Bill, we always like to kind of understand you. In the intro, we gave a little bit of the career arc and some of the areas that you've worked in and the kinds of companies. So help us understand that a little bit more and how it evolved to what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's been a long road. I've been around a long time. I've actually been in the high tech industry pretty much consistently since I graduated from high school, and I won't say when that was, but in the information governance, e-discovery, archiving kind of realm, I've been in it for, like Jody, you said, about 25 years. I originally got involved in information management and archiving for regulatory compliance and e-discovery back in 2001, when I was working at Storage Tech here in Boulder, Colorado. In fact, I wrote the original business plan for their first email archiving solution, and that's when I really got focused on compliance, regulatory compliance, and e-discovery, but also the need to archive data for those reasons. And since then, I've been involved in some form of archiving or e-discovery ever since. I've been at Hitachi Data Systems. I actually spent several years at a consultancy, basically running the e-discovery and regulatory compliance practices at the consultant. So I've kind of seen it from both sides, both from a vendor point of view as well as from a client consultant, helping them look at these things. And then additionally, I was at a company called Recommind several years ago. One of the pioneers in e-discovery software, really utilizing this idea of machine learning and AI for discovery. We called it back then predictive coding. Now I think what a lot of the terminology for predictive coding has really changed to technology-assisted review, computer-aided review, those kinds of things. But I've been at Archive 360 for going on 6 years now, and we have basically years ago introduced a cloud archiving and information management platform that really was really focused on addressing e-discovery as well as regulatory compliance and what to do with all that information, how to hold it, how to secure it, those kinds of things. So it's been really interesting, and I'm really actually glad that I've been able to kind of stay with the same focus for this number of years.
Well, I know we're going to dive in on that intersection of e-discovery and data retention and privacy and security, and maybe a little Colorado chat as well. You're in our favorite place.
Good.
Remember, it's a privacy podcast, not a Colorado podcast.
You're breaking up. I can't hear what you're saying.
Funny.
Well, Bill, just having come off a webinar that we participated in together, maybe we'll cover some familiar ground. So why don't we start with how privacy and cyber is evolving now that we have so much work that's being done on the cloud?
Yeah, that's been interesting, and I've been involved with the cloud for probably 10 years now. But one of the things I've noticed just lately, when I say lately, over the last 3-4 years, prior to 3 or 4 years ago, it was really tough to get organizations, companies, especially larger ones, to really adopt the cloud completely. And they would talk about we're looking to eventually move our data centers up into the cloud. We're looking for cost savings and things like this. But 3-4 years ago, they were still hesitant to move sensitive data up into the cloud. And that has really changed. I mean, everybody's been talking about digital transformation and so forth, but with the additional security capabilities that the big public cloud providers have now, like Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google, those folks. I mean, they employ thousands and thousands of security people, as well as privacy people and regulatory people, all kinds of things. So the attitude from, say, CISOs, chief information security officers, to hold back sensitive data, to now looking to move everything up there, including, by the way, healthcare providers. They were the most reticent. They didn't want to put PHI up there, but now it's full court press. We need to get up there to save money and so forth. So some of the things we've seen over those last 3 or 4 years, they've basically taken on the stance that yes, we're going to move it in the cloud, but now they're looking at how can we upgrade security. I mean, they want to encrypt their data, which common sense. I'm glad they want to do that. That's one of my faults with other things that we can talk about if we get the time. But they're asking about very particular things. I want to encrypt my data. I don't want the cloud provider to do it. For example, I want to have my own encryption keys instead of the cloud provider using their encryption keys to encrypt my data. So there's that. They want to manage their own encryption keys, so that, for example, and this sounds really paranoid, but it's true. A couple of years ago, we had large companies looking at our cloud offering, but they were saying, well, gee, we don't want to put our sensitive data up there and have you encrypt it and hold the encryption keys, because what if the U.S. intelligence agencies, serve the cloud provider with a secrecy warrant? We don't want that. We don't want them giving unencrypting our data and then giving the data over and then being told they can't even tell us that they did it. I'm sure that didn't happen very often. I don't know, Justin, if you have different stats on that, but they were paranoid about that, and they've really gone to this point of, I want complete control of the security of my data while in a third-party cloud. So that's been one of the bigger things, and then things associated with that, encryption key storage, but also this idea of, there's enterprise or infrastructure security, but there's also individual data security. And really nowadays, with the sophistication of the kinds of attacks we're seeing, you really need to have both. It used to be that companies would think of data security as perimeter security. Well, gee, I'm not going to let anybody in that shouldn't be there. Well, with phishing and smishing and all these other kinds of things, people can jump that pretty quickly, and then they're in. What other capabilities do you have around protecting individual sensitive files?
It seems like you have a question.
No, you go first.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
It happens on occasion.
You mentioned some of the different tools that you're starting to see companies want to add on top. Can you share a little bit more about maybe some of the common ones that you're seeing? And if a company is interested, maybe they've moved everything to the cloud, but they haven't done all of those extra layers, what might be some of the ones that they'd want to start with?
Well, in my mind, and I ask people that I talk to, and I've talked to many state legislators who are doing privacy bills and stuff. What are those absolute must-haves for protecting data? And in my mind, privacy and security are very closely tied together. You really can't have privacy unless the data is secure, and so forth. But they're looking at what are those features, functionality, for example, in a cloud that we can turn on and really forget, not have a full-time management staff trying to manage the cloud, because that's one of the advantages of for example, SaaS platforms in the cloud is it's a set it and forget it type of thing. The SaaS provider manages most of that. Now, looking back at what I just said about CISOs wanting more control about security, there's a not so happy medium between those things. But I think the first thing that I hear professionals bring, one of the first things I hear professionals bring up, especially from coming from CISOs and so forth, is what data do we need to protect and how are we going to protect it? And usually the first step is, does that mean we need to encrypt it? Now, I'm a big proponent of encryption. It's technology that's been around forever. Nowadays, especially in the cloud, where you get the economies of scale with the availability of CPU up in the cloud, it's not like you need to buy 100 extra servers to do the encryption and decryption. It can be done on the fly within the cloud. So there's really no reason not to be encrypting at least sensitive data as you move it around and move it up into the cloud. And that's one of the biggest ones. And then understanding that the other one is most CISOs and most C-level that I run into don't understand what data they have. Many of them are still focused on, well, gee, I need to manage the records and all the other crap we let the employees take care of. Well, that 95% of that corporate information that the employees are supposed to be managing, number one, they're not. And number two, it's chock full of all kinds of sensitive material, PII and bank account numbers and driver's license numbers and all kinds of things that the management doesn't understand. And with the new laws that are coming up, companies have to be able to understand what's in that content and that they have to manage it and secure it, all of it, not just the record.
Absolutely. And as the privacy person here who always emphasizes data inventories to help make sure we can understand the kind of data we have, so we understand how we're using it and where else it's going, which is really important to help comply with the privacy laws. You also need to know where all that data is, or you can't protect it, or know what vendor it's at, and make sure that you have the right vendor. All kinds of employees are picking their favorite vendor out there that may or may not be doing what we want.
Well, yeah, and that's where you get into the idea, and it crosses over with discovery as well. You need to be creating and keeping up to date data maps. You need to know where all the information is, whether it's a record or not. Where is it? In Discovery, you would have to go, find all relevant information. Doesn't matter if it's a record or not. That's why data maps are great. But even here with looking at security, if you don't know where the data is, how are you going to secure it beyond just the perimeter security? I did work years ago as a consultant with a large electricity distribution company, and they won. I first off, I started doing an inventory of all of their servers and storage and all kinds of stuff, and I asked them, give me a list of how many servers you have, where they're at, what they're doing, all these kinds of things. And they came back and said, well, we think we have about 900. And we sort of use them this way. And this was a power distribution thing, under, Homeland Security protection, all kinds of neat stuff. And after about 6 months, we found that they had over 5,000 servers with all kinds of very sensitive stuff on it that they didn't even know they had. So, how they were having issues with power distribution, I understand why.
You were giggling over here. Go ahead, giggle monster.
I guess the question I had when we talk about the data map is, so let's assume you have a ransomware event. They encrypt your network. Well, if you don't have a data map, how do you even know where the data is during the event? Because it's all encrypted. And I've had multiple events where the client has screamed up and down, there's no PI. And of course, you do the forensics and you find it on somebody's laptop or in 4 other places. Well, we don't put data there.
Yeah.
But it's there.
Oh,
As Bill said, your employees put it there.
Especially with the remote workforce, when you worked from home and you were having crazy slow times on the VPN, people are like, I'll just download it to my C drive. When I'm done, I'll upload it back to the corporate network. Well, now the copy of that data is sitting on their personal computer.
Yeah. Well, I've seen reputable market stats from, the big market research firms that estimate that anywhere from 75 to 80% of all corporate data is stored on workstations and laptops that the company centrally cannot access, doesn't know it's there, can't index or anything else. So, all that data sitting on my laptop, that's a lot more than any data that I've created or put up, within a central repository that the company manages. And that's just high-tech corporate culture. I mean, and for years and still, most companies look at that and say, well, that's the employees. I only care about the records. But that's where a lot of the IP is, the corporate know-how, the sensitive data, and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're reaching a point where culture has to change over the next several years to where all data is managed, not just the stuff that flows through centralized systems.
Well, I think one question I wanted to discuss with Bill is I'm thinking maybe today we can put the Badger hat on Jody, since the Wisconsin legislature, I think at least their House of Representatives passed their privacy bill.
I saw that yesterday.
And I guess it heads to the Senate. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask the question of, how is the proliferation of state privacy laws impacting what your business does, Bill?
Well, for the longest time, and currently, I think, Jody, tell me if I'm wrong, but we have 3 real privacy laws. Colorado.
That's right. Those that are passed, not quite effective.
Exactly.
2023, we're going to have a big celebration.
And Bill, what state is included in those 3?
This is a privacy podcast, not a Colorado podcast.
Yes, but the 2 have just intersected because Colorado has passed a privacy law. There you go.
I'm scheduled to do a podcast with Colorado State Senator Paul Lundeen here in the very near future about he's one of the 2 co-authors of the Colorado bill. But I have been interviewing others. Kevin Thomas from New York Senator, Marsden from Virginia, actually Steve Elkins from Minnesota. And one of the things, I don't know if you saw this, Jody, yesterday, David Strauss, well-known guy, runs, private. He's a lawyer at Hush Blackwell, I think. And he keeps track of all this stuff. And he was on a webcast yesterday. He was saying that just this year in 2022, there were 23 or 27 states introduced new privacy bills. And obviously not all of them are going to pass, maybe not half of them, but eventually over the next couple of years, we're looking at a lot of states, probably more than 25, 30, 35 that are going to have their own privacy bills or privacy laws. And in interviewing these state senators, they all, kind of admit, and rightfully so, that, we look at Washington State's bill that still hasn't passed. We've looked at, other bills, and we take bits and pieces, and, we look at California's and kind of stay away from that because it's they consider it a bridge too far type of thing. But eventually they'll get there. But the problem is that the problem that's going to be is that all of these state laws are going to differ slightly. Yeah, they all kind of have the same rights, but their definitions are different of what a data controller is versus a processor versus this versus that. Their exclusions are different, who they're excluding, within the state, what businesses, those kinds of things. And there's all of these differences really add up. So what we're looking at starting now, going years down the line, is companies are going to have to be able to manage many, many, many different laws that differ slightly based on the geography of the PII they're collecting and why they're collecting it. Those kinds of things. And that's not even taking into consideration, all of the foreign data privacy laws now. So I think companies are going to need to much more granularly manage all of their data, and really manage it against all of these slightly differing privacy laws. And that's gonna really require some real investment, but also dedication, CPU, all kinds of things. And I asked the state legislators that. I said, do you see what this is going to do? Because none of them really think that the federal government is going to come up with a superseding federal law that takes them all off the hook. So at least not in the next couple of years. That's what they all think, and I sort of agree. So what companies are looking at is they're going to be looking for solutions that can handle that kind of legal granularity, so that they're not, inadvertently violating all of these privacy laws. And by the way, I mean, one of my pet peeves with all of these laws is they all use almost exactly the same descriptions of what the expectation is. And the one that really bugs me is they all say, must use a reasonably secure capability of securing the data. I forget what that said, but they all use almost exactly the same sentence, and it's so wishy-washy that it's almost unbelievable. I mean, you tell me, Justin, could a first-year lawyer beat this whole idea? Not that I'm saying you're a first lawyer, you're a lawyer by any means, but could an attorney beat this?
This person.
Could an attorney beat this idea of what was reasonable? I mean, that's open to interpretation. If they're all saying must take reasonable, practices to secure the data. So what I've been asking him is, why don't you say that you must use nowadays zero trust, or you must encrypt all data while in transit and while at rest? And they all kind of, sit back and say, well, no one told us to put that in the bill.
Well, I think, Bill, part of the challenge you have with reasonable security, if you and I were having a conversation in 2019 or 20, multi-factor authentication was a nice to have.
Yeah.
In 2022, on every deal I work on, it's table stakes, it's in the contract. You're going to have to really persuade me, which is highly unlikely, that it's coming out.
Yeah.
And so the threats are evolving. Now, as you know, I do a lot of work in blockchain and Web3. And there's all kinds of exploits around getting around the code for smart contracts and securing all of that. And so with the threat that evolves, it's really kind of hard to write a law that gets down to that level of granularity, because over time it will change. Just like we have, the Securities Act of 1933, securities fraud. Well, that has really evolved because now you can have securities fraud online. You could have it with an NFT or some type of digital asset, because now that could be construed as a security.
Yeah.
That's part of the challenge you have with security, because the threat and the technology evolve so quickly. The way lawmakers get around that is they use, to your point, the wishy-washy language of reasonable. I do it in contracts all the time because there's certain things that it's hard to have a 5-year contract and have that level of specificity. So what do people do? It's reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that point of view. Yeah. I would like to see, minimum procedures, spelled out maybe. But I do take what you're saying. It does make sense.
What are you seeing companies do in practice today to get ready, like we said, for the 3 new laws that are coming, and whichever ones this year will pass and join the privacy alphabet soup?
It's funny. It's not funny. We deal with, every size of company in every industry. And we deal with, we've sold solutions into the big Wall Street banks, into, the big government agencies and those kinds of things. And they're very aware of security. And I'm talking about non-governmental agencies, like the banks, like energy companies, things like that. So far, I have not seen any of them ask about anything having to do with privacy law. I mean, it's disappointing, and it's a little surprising, because it's not like it's a stealth topic. It's out there. There's a lot of talk about it. But for example, one of the things that I've told these companies to at least watch out for is this whole idea of uh, uh, data subject access requests, DSARs. And what is that going to mean to a company in having to respond to lots of data subject access requests? Both IDC and Gartner have stated almost exactly the same numbers, that currently, or back last year, the average number of data subject access requests that the average company was receiving was 142 per month, at a cost of $200,000 per month just to service those. And that was really based on 2 laws, GDPR and CCPA. What happens if you have 30 different privacy laws out there, or 40 or 50? And people are hitting, corporate websites, filling out these forms saying, what data do you have on me? Gee, that's wrong and that's wrong. I want you to delete it all. All this kind of being able to respond to that without having managed all of your data. It's going to be in the millions upon millions of dollars per year, just being able to react to these privacy right requests. And to me, the ROI of setting yourself up to manage the data and be able to query it and be able to respond to these kinds of actions is really an ROI kind of calculation as to, what's the cost of being able to do that versus what you're going to pay if you can't do it. Versus, not even taking into consideration the fines of not being able to respond to it, but just the corporate cost of trying to keep up with all of those things. I think it's going to be massive.
I would agree. And I would add to that, I think for some companies, if they have not addressed it and they don't have a solid process, what else can happen is many companies have created some type of process. Here's a form, here's an email. And then people can still go through other channels. If I'm talking to customer support and I'm not happy, I might make a request that way. If I know someone on a sales team and I'm not happy, I might go through that way. if there's no training, which actually California requires training, but if companies really haven't solidified the process and trained ongoing all those channels, not only are there fines and obviously just the cost to manage it, but there's the potential loss of business that will happen as well if mishandled.
Yeah. And getting back to your original question, I am very surprised that these established companies with large or massive IT organizations with gigantic regulatory and legal departments, the subject of how am I going to use your system to help me comply with privacy regulations has not come up. And now that you brought that question up, that to me that's pretty surprising. And I think like you say, I think it's a matter of education, and it's a matter of them not being shown, told, educated on what the costs are going to be if they're not aware of these things. Because and you know this, the probably better than I do, the Colorado bill, the Colorado bill has a $20,000 fine versus I think California's is 250, 200, 2,500 to 7,500, something like that. I think one of them just came out with 15 grand, but 20 grand. And that's per, kind of subject versus, well, gee, I get a breach and I'm going to pay out $20,000. No, it could be $20,000 times 100,000. So it's the downside with all of these and tying it back to cybersecurity is massive. If you could breach, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Jody, and I think I'm right, but with the CCPA originally, there was this idea of presumed damages. And I don't know if it actually, I know I read a bunch about it, but the idea was, well, if you get breached and the PII was actually accessed, you don't know if it was actually copied, you don't know if it's used, if it's causing damage to the end user. But the Attorney General would basically sue you anyway, and under this idea of presumed damages. And I think one or two other state bills I've seen are including that now too, which along with private right of action and things like that. I mean, we're looking at a war zone for companies around all of these privacy bills.
Well, I think we know our next webinar topic. More education on this. There we go.
Well said. So, Bill, what is your best privacy or security tip you would like to share with our audience?
Well, you already mentioned it, and I will heartily agree. But it's always turn on multi-factor authentication, and if the system or the application doesn't offer it, walk away. I think that's the minimum.
Well, it's a very popular one. We ask the same question to every guest, and that is the leader for sure.
Unique.
So when you're not doing webinars and podcasts and educating and advising clients in the world of privacy and security, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, as we've stated several times, I live in Colorado, and I'm approximately 40 miles from Rocky Mountain National Park. So it's a quick drive. So we spend a lot of time up in the park, but also around it, hiking in the spring, summer, fall, and then during the winter when it's not 1 degree outside, we'll go up there and go snowshoeing and things like that. So that's a lot of fun. I also like to cook, but I make things like different kinds of bison jerky and things like that. I don't like cooked meals or anything like that, but I make healthy snacks and things like that. But being close to Rocky Mountain National Park and the various state parks, like 10 miles from me, it makes it really easy to stay active.
That sounds lovely. I really enjoy snowshoeing. I picked it up a few years ago. Bill, if people would like to connect with you or learn more about Archive 360, where should they go?
Well, they can go to our website at www.archive360.com, or they can email me, and it's bill.tolson, Tolson, at archive360.com. Otherwise, I'm also on LinkedIn and all those other places. Pretty easy to find, but look forward to people connecting and carrying on the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights into the world of privacy and cloud and security. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.